All right. Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome back to another Learning Tech Talks where we are exploring the landscape of learning technology while cutting through the fluff and getting the questions answered you need answered. Today's going to be a fun one. I say that, I think, every episode, but they really are a lot of fun. And so today I'm joined by Guy Sellwood and David Barone, and we're going to be talking about onboarding. And actually, we're going to spend some time actually demystifying that because even in our, before we hit the live button here, we talked about some of the discrepancies and lack of kind of universal understanding of what we mean when we talk about onboarding. So this is going to be a really fun one. Thanks all of you for joining in. And if you would, just to make this a little bit fun and interactive, let us know where you are in the world today. So go ahead and comment in and let's play along as well. So Guy, I'm going to go clockwise and we're going to start with you. Guy, where are you today?
So I'm in London, UK, just to the west of London. Probably people would know Hampton Court, not far from Hampton Court.
All right. Well, you know what? We've got a fair amount of folks that join from the UK, so that will probably be familiar territory for many. All right. So David, how about you?
West, outside of Philly, the west side, actually very close to the Delaware state line. Not everyone knows, like, the state of Delaware is actually almost a suburb of Philly, but that's where I'm at.
It's about the size of a suburb of Philly as well. So, oh wait, no, I might be getting my states wrong. Yeah, I'm getting my states wrong. Never mind. Anyway.
You're thinking Rhode Island. You're thinking Rhode Island.
I'm thinking Rhode Island. I know. Yes, here's my geography.
Delaware could beat up Rhode Island, I think.
Delaware is like the big brother that, yes, could totally beat up Rhode Island. Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, and I'm in Milwaukee, Waukesha specifically here, western suburb, as always. So let's also then let's have a little bit of fun. Let's have a little bit of fun into this one, and I'm going to reverse the order, but everybody, you can play along as well. So David, if I made you sing karaoke, and by the way, do you say karaoke or karaoke? Because this is a polarizing topic.
Oh, it's karaoke.
Karaoke. All right. All right. And what song would you pick?
Well, I guess, as you know, I have a bunch of kids, and I'm about 2 or 3 years behind them. So when I start playing a song, they're like, yeah, that song's so old. But lately I've been playing Saturday Sun by Vance Joy. So that's kind of a... my kids were playing it, and I kind of just caught up. Oh, it's Saturday, son. Yeah,
I wasn't going to make you sing it, but
I wanted to beat you to it. I wanted to beat you to it.
All right, yeah. Well, I guess it's better to get in front of it than to have me just call you out on it. Okay, that's exactly. What's funny is bringing up the kids thing. So we both joke about the fact we both got like loads of kids, and it's just chaos. But I listen to music all the time, and my kids have actually gotten so used to it that they just think that is normal, for them. So they're listening to like 70s classic rock and Linkin Park and this, and they're just like, that's, daddy's music, which is theirs now. So teaching them the good stuff.
Well, my kids say, do I put on the dad's playlist? So they'll play like some kind of like 80s kind of soft punk kind of new wave stuff. So they've I've embedded it in their brains over the years. It's pretty fun.
There you go. Well, good things to embed with them. All right. So how about you, Guy? If I were to make you sing, what would you sing for us?
Well, I can tell you from experience that I was in a karaoke bar one time, and I went up and I said, yeah, I'm going to sing Angels by Robbie Williams. And the reason I said I'd do this is because I thought it was really simple. I thought it was like 2 lines to the song. And I remember getting up there and about 20 seconds in, I don't remember this bit. Where did this bit come from? like this is way more complicated than I think. So more recently, talking of kids, my youngest is a singer, dancer, actor, whatever, and she's got a little karaoke machine, and she fed me a few porn star martinis, and we ended up singing some Stevie Wonder. That's good karaoke territory in my experience.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So for both of you, does it take a little liquid courage to get into that, or could we just literally put you on stage and you would just go with it?
I got to drink a little bit of personality before I get up there.
Okay. A little bit of personality. Okay. All right. So for mine, I used to. I don't anymore, mainly because I don't have time to go do this kind of stuff. But with a little bit of personality, I'll do it. And I actually used to keep. This is how dorky I am. I would bring a harmonica just in case karaoke came up, because I can play the Billy Joel Piano Man song, and on the harmonica, and it was always fun to do that because that's one of those songs when you start singing, sing us a song, the piano mat, like everybody's just like, boom, they're just into it. And that to me was the most fun part. Like I didn't care about me singing. It was more the fact that, everybody in the crowd's rocking and singing along. So anyway, that would be mine, but it would take a little bit to get me doing it. And I will definitely not bust into it in the morning with my gravelly throat on Learning Tech Talks, because we'll just lose all the viewers. The viewers will just be like, eh.
Well, hey, Chris, little plug here. I bought a karaoke mic that hooks up to your phone.
Okay.
Like $30. I'm telling you, you break that out at a party, people will start singing karaoke. It's a good call.
Okay. All right. Well, there you go. I'm gonna have to find my harmonica and then bring it back. So, all right. And then one last update for those of you watching, and then we'll get into the discussion. If you have not already, I would love to continue the conversation with all of you. So feel free to join the Learning Sharks community, where we just continue these conversations. Doesn't matter what walk of L&D you're coming from, but it's just a great place where we take the conversation further and just answer questions. So it's community.learningsharks.com. Love to see you there. All right, so let's transition this conversation a little bit over into the topic at hand, which is onboarding. I almost blanked on that. That would have been here. I'm like so caught up in karaoke that we would have been like, what? But so we're talking about onboarding, but that isn't necessarily both your backgrounds. So tell me a little bit about your backgrounds, and I know, but not everybody does, how the two of you ended up connecting. So Guy, why don't we start with you on this? Was, kid selling lemonade and you went, you know what, someday I'm going to create an onboarding app, or how did that end up happening?
Yeah, so for me, I probably am one of those people who dreamed of doing what I do. I'm very, very privileged. I started my career in what we call the health service here. We have a nationalized health service, and I was working in that field in health education in my first job as a graduate out of college, as you would call it. And I went on a leadership development program for 2 weeks, and we did all sorts of things. And I just loved it. I just thought, this is the business. And then probably about 3 or 4 years later, I got chatting to some guys I played five-a-side football with, and they ran a small consulting firm. And it just happened that I was looking for some new work, and I got engaged with them around about 93 as a consultant. And so I started off doing the training delivery, facilitation, then designing programs and that kind of thing. And I've been with Prosell since 93. But I think the thing that's always engaged me in what I do is that we're a consulting firm primarily. We take business challenges from our clients, very often in the sales field, a customer experience field. And then we design solutions that can incorporate face-to-face training. It can incorporate, obviously now more likely virtual training over Zoom or something. But we'll also bring some tech. We'll also bring some coaching. And one of the big things is about building a legacy. So we do a lot of work around operational leaders being effective as coaches. And the piece we often do differently is that we work on what to coach. What's the model of behavior that you're trying to engender in the people you work with in terms of a sales or a customer service community? And then how do you do that? How do you bring that about through a coaching process? And so we then evaluate. We look at then, well, what's the impact on the learning? So what's the behavioral change? But we also then look at the impact on the business. And we've been doing that for a long time. A lot of people talk about it these days, but we have a track history in that space. And Dave and I met. We were working at Comcast, very privileged to work with them since 2010. And we were working on a big frontline leadership coaching program. And I got a call from these guys in the Business Services College to start doing a bit of that work. And then out of that spawned this onboarding opportunity with their sales community. Okay. So yeah, that's how we got to meet.
Okay. So the space has been something you've always wanted to be in, but the actual designing of the app, it wasn't like, you know what, I want to go create a SaaS and that's the goal. It just grew out of this project where you were just working together and saying, you know what, I think we need something that specifically focuses on this. Okay.
Yeah, and I think for me, I'm very proud of what we've developed, but one of the reasons I'm proud of what we developed with Dave and his team and others along the way is it is led by customer requirements. It's very much designed with the customer in mind. No, you're right. We didn't just go, we've got a great idea here, let's put some technology together. We actually built it to serve the needs of Dave and his team. And then consequently, as I've had other customers on board, we take their ideas and we develop other features and capabilities to suit the needs that people have. So for me, it's a classic, kind of needs delivered solution.
Got it. Well, so now we know how the two of you connected. And then, so David, let's bring this in because you come on from the practitioner side, and now you're kind of teaming up and helping figure this piece out. So a little bit about your background, and then we kind of know how the connection happened, but what are you doing now?
Yeah. So my background, actually, I'm an electrical engineer. I spent my first probably 6-7 years at a nuclear power plant working for Exelon Electric Utility, anti-seize, yellow suits, the whole 9 yards. And did a lot of operational work, meter reading operations, large account services. And then Exelon said, hey, we're offering a package that people want to leave. And I said, oh, is it voluntary? They said, no. We're going to pick you. I said, well, I want to volunteer. And the lady goes to me, don't you have 5 kids? I'm like, yeah. She goes, do you have a job? I said, no. She goes, have you talked to your wife? I said, well, I was going to tonight. And she's like, why don't you go home and talk to your wife? So, and as you probably know,
we're not letting you go right now. I don't think you're thinking straight.
Exactly. As a matter of fact, go down the hall for the testing. But next thing you know, I broke into karaoke. But yeah, no. But what was kind of interesting about it is, I had a bunch of kids, and it's like, do I want to work at the same company my whole life? What do I want to teach my kids? I'm telling them to take chances. So I left there. Someone at Comcast called me and said, hey, we're starting up this Comcast business. You want to get involved? I said, sure. I went over there, did some operational stuff, and then I got called by the CLO. And she said, hey, do you want to run Business Service College or Comcast Business College? And the funny thing was, I got a call from L&D, and the first thing I thought about, at electric utilities, you go teach when you're too old to climb poles. So I'm sitting there going, this is like retirement. I'm like, I'm going to L&D to retire? And then I realized L&D drives people to retirement is what really happens, right? So I did that, Comcast Business College, met up with Guy. I also ran innovation for all of Comcast University. Left there late last year, and I've been doing some consulting. Most recently, I've been helping Josh Burson do a couple things. So, I mean, just looking for the next adventure.
Well, it's funny you come from the business side of things, and while I've always been in learning and development, I always was in more of an operational function until my most recent role. Now I'm in HR, but yeah, it's just a different perspective that you bring to it. So the story made me laugh though, because I'm just picturing you thinking like the old racehorse where you're like, wow. You're just telling me it's time for me to retire, I guess. If you're like, yeah, you're doing great, but why don't you come over to L&D and teach the new kids? How's that sound to you?
Well, it's funny. Maybe it's my engineer background, but someone's like, oh, L&D, you're in HR? And I'm always like, no, I'm not in HR. I'm L&D because I'm not an HR person, so I'm an L&D technologist, I guess, or architect, if you want to call it.
All right. Well, so I'm going to try something new because based on some of the feedback I got from some of my community members, they said, it'd be great if there was a specific section where you just spent a few minutes showing the product. Because I think for a lot of people, they hear these conversations, they go, I get it. Conceptually, it makes sense. But what does that look like? So we're not going to sit and go deep into a hardcore demo or anything like that. But now we've talked about, so there was this problem that you were both mulling around going, man, we need to do something about it. Now that's translated over into a technical solution. So let's just I need to come up with a clever name for it, but I'm trying to remember what the person in the community said. I think they said like lightning demo or something really
lightning
catchy.
Round, maybe lightning round.
Lightning round. Like we'll come up with something real fun. I don't have a cool one.
You need some noise background, like a lightning
another
bolt.
video that I can queue up midstream that just kind of like boom comes in and does it. But anyway, enough about that, or we'll just get distracted with that. But let's talk about this because we talked about this pain point and before we do, I think one of the big things that we can talk about is, and let me flip back to this. See, I told you this was going to happen, but we really want to.
You get all excited.
I know, I did. But the thing we really want to distinguish between this is, I think a lot of times when people think onboarding, they're thinking orientation. A lot of times people hear onboarding, they think of that first day or first couple days where you come make people sit in a room and you make them fill out an I-9 and maybe you go through some of the corporate values or some of the general things, paperwork, get them signed up for benefits, and then you kind of like shoo them out the door and say, all right, good job, good luck, bye, welcome to the company. That's not what we're talking about when we're talking about onboarding. That to me, and I actually have a really clear delineation. There's orientation and there's onboarding. And onboarding is that sustainable, like we're actually tracking you through into the organization and actually helping grow the skills and things you need to be successful in a role. And that doesn't end in a couple days or even honestly a couple weeks. I mean, this takes a while to get somebody oriented. Is that fair?
Yeah,
Totally fair, Chris. And we took it maybe another step on, which is it's about capability building. It's about building someone's skill sets in the role. So Dave talked about sales and customer service teams. They're not roles that people do based just on their knowledge set. They have to be able to articulate, they have to be able to negotiate, they have to be able to influence, they have to be able to do skills which are capabilities. And I think this was one of the things that we set out early on, was that you had this group of, and Dave can give the detail, but sales community out right across the United States in their very often starting out in their home offices, and they had to build capability. They had to go and talk to customers about the products, yes, and they had to be able to articulate the solution, why the product was good for the customer in the particular circumstances they're in their businesses and so on. And they had to do that remotely. And there were some other sort of tensions in there. Is that right, Dave, around time to support people's capability building with managers and that kind of thing?
Most definitely. And just to talk about the onboarding piece. So Comcast, as I told you before, 25,000 frontline employees are on board every year. When you're a cable technician, you didn't go to college for cable technicianology. You came in and you say, Comcast, teach me how to do my job. So, I mean, a technician, a customer service rep, people in Comcast territories might argue differently, but a customer service rep gets about 6 weeks of training before they do their job. They have to know the products. They have to know how to reset modems. So we used to have orientation where we had the Comcast founders video, in 1953, and that was orientation. But onboarding was how to do your job. That's where me and Guy got together and said, you know what, telling them how to do their job is great, but seeing them demonstrate the skills is where we want to get to.
Actually enabling them to do it. And again, I think it's easy to kind of go one direction or the other. And really it's about blending the two together, where you say, look, is it important to introduce people to the company values and what you're doing and really set that? Absolutely. Like, we're not saying that's not important. We're not saying it's not valuable to make sure their computer works and that they know how to get into the systems. And those are all really good things. But then once they move on, they need that ongoing support, because especially like you're talking about, David, in certain roles where it's like, it's a very tactical type of role where people need to know how to do this. But even in knowledge worker roles, oftentimes there's still components of things that sometimes we just dump the fire hose on them, and we just open up the floodgates in the LMS and say, here's 3,700 modules that you're going to need to complete in the first 90 days. And it just leaves people going like, I don't even know what to do with all of this. Like, how are we going to get there? And I think that's what we're talking about, is how do you streamline this? So to make it really fun, check this out, right? We're going to go to the lightning demo piece of it, right? Yeah, like that's the...
My hair's going to stand up. And
That's right. So let's do this a little bit. Go for it.
Chris, one thing on that is, what we also saw is, as you talk about it, at Comcast, we used to call it boarding school. They would say, let's ship our people over to Comcast University, and they'll come back ready to roll. And then the manager would be like, hi, I'm Joe. What's your name? I'd like to introduce myself. And we said, it can't work that way. You need that seamless transition. So you need the managers engaged in that onboarding. So when they come out of onboarding, it's a continuation, not a start over. Because what they teach you in skill, what they teach you in training. Let me show you how we really do it.
Let me show you how it really works.
Yeah, exactly. And the goal was really try to avoid that. That was another piece we were kind of working through, because we thought that really would have a big impact on attrition.
So it's an important point. Like we said, we're going to continue the dialogue about what makes this all really well, but we'll shift over to the exciting portion of this piece. So let's take a look at it. So tell me a little bit about what we're looking at, and then I'm warning you, I'm probably going to ask follow-up questions, but let's spend a few minutes at least visualizing this for people so they can see what we're talking about in terms of supporting this process. Okay,
so what we have here, Chris, is a kind of login page, homepage for a new hire. Okay, so and this is just our demo site, so it's got all sorts of things in it. But you have a briefing here which people can fill out for the role, and each, I guess, kind of role has their own program. So you just talked about too many assets to look for. Some of the feedback we got really early on was, I want everything in one place. I just want to go somewhere that's going to give me what I need for my role and what I need to do. So
specific to onboarding, correct?
Yeah, totally. First 90 days, first 120 days, whatever. And so what we build out is really straightforward in many respects, but you have sections and activities. Now, the key thing about our platform is it's very versatile. So you can put in just text activities, which just inform or maybe send people on a link. We can connect up to e-learning assets from an e-learning author site, an Adobe site or whatever. We can use forms to drive checklists, so that kind of thing.
And so these are all gated. If I'm understanding right, like these basically blowouts that we're talking about, you're actually gating the experience into, hey, this is the flow. Because going back to something we talked about before, this is honestly one of the things you hear from employees all the time is the fact that I'm just not quite sure where to start or what I should do next. So the purpose, I'm assuming, of this is to actually then say, well, here is the order. This is what to follow.
Absolutely. And I know Dave and I and others have kicked this one around. To what degree do you kind of make it self-directed and to which degree do you direct? And we use a thing called, as you said, gating, where you can shut these sections off and have prerequisites that need to be completed. Okay. And certainly in the first iteration we built, they had to complete their first week, and that had to be signed off by their manager. So this is the participant view, but let me just bring in this view. This view is the manager view. So our manager is connected to our individual participant through the platform. So what I'm seeing here is who I'm connected to, who are all my new hires that I'm accountable for or responsible for, and how do I kind of keep a track on their progress through the platform, through their program, and so on. So what we were very keen to
one thing I'm curious about, because I like this, we talked about, I told you I was going to do this.
There you are.
The part that we talked about that you mentioned was one of the things when you were digging into this was the need to kind of separate it from the other noise, which I have to imagine there's probably debate on both sides of this in terms of like, well, no, we want it to feel like perfectly seamless in and mixed in with everything else. But what's interesting about your point, and it's kind of got me thinking about this a little bit, is when somebody's new to a role or the organization, like, and being new to an organization, I joined an organization a few months ago. It's a very overwhelming time because you're getting hit with a lot of different things. So that intentional decision to kind of say, hey, we're actually separating onboarding from all the other noise. So that was an intentional decision to say, no, this is a separate experience from all the other stuff that you're dealing with right now. Is that accurate?
Well, again, one thing I'd say is, so we use it a couple different ways, right? This portal's used for like care new hire, where it's 40 hours a week, 5 weeks. You go through the whole thing, and this is what you're doing. For our sales one that we're going to talk about, it was more about 6-8 hours a week while you're kind of, I would say, learning the flow of work, probably a little overused, but while you're doing your things and meeting people and doing that, you've also got your responsibility to go in the portal and do 8 hours a week. So we've done it two different ways, where it's consumes a whole week, or it's almost like, not say filler work, but works within, the confines of what you're already doing.
Okay. Got it. And so then the manager side of it, going back to what we talked about before, of the importance of, and this does happen a lot, where a lot of times you'll see managers, and anybody who's done onboarding, you've probably had this conversation where it's like, well, can't you just send them to me when they're done? Right? Like, can't you just send me them when they're ready? And it's like, no.
just insert the chip, and then send them over,
Right. And it's like, no, the answer to that is no, you need to play. Yes, there are things we can own. And yes, there are components of this that we can be responsible for and structuring and driving it. And I've seen debates on both sides where it's like, well, we can't control onboarding. Well, there's more responsibility that we can take that we don't always take. But on the flip side, you can't swing the other way to what I think the managers ideally would like, which is just call me when they're done. Just call me when they're done, and then I'll move on to that kind of a thing.
But you must also have seen that scenario. People do 60 days with the training team, and they do that orientation to the company, and then they kind of go through a whole bunch of capability development. They do their role plays, and then they arrive in their role. And all too often I hear people say, yeah, but then I had to teach them how it really is. There's this kind of idea that somehow the training room is not the same as the workplace. So I think what we were trying to do with this was bring a more blend to that. So a degree of the learning is done online, and some of it was done in boot camp, which I'm sure Dave will talk about in class. But actually, a lot of it was done through one-to-ones, through what the guys at Comcast call a ride-along. People get observed and get feedback on how they're doing the job. And won't come as any great surprise to you. As a coaching and training consulting, feedback for us is the real gold, and if you can facilitate feedback to people about how they're doing and what they do from those that look after them, that work with them, so it might be subject matter experts, it might be coaches, it might be managers, people grow really quick,
Yeah, the trick was we wanted to do it in the platform so we could measure the whole thing. So I had a meeting with this guy, and let's put feedback in the platform so we can make sure it's happening, and not turn into the Gestapo, but we want to make sure that managers are doing their jobs, because we found out very clearly that managers that do their job get less attrition from their workforce.
Well, and that actually brings up a good point, and we'll go. I actually want to bring it back into the feed, because one of the things, Deborah brought up a comment, which I think this will dig into it a little bit, is that at first glance you might say, okay, so this is kind of like learning paths, which you can structure in maybe an LMS or maybe a piece of learning tech that we have today. It may look very familiar to that. But what we're talking about right now, and again, I'm curious how the technology is helping enable this, is a lot of times those learning paths are very just push driven. It's a structure of content that is very, okay, do this and then watch this and then read this and then do this. It's a very push down. But what we're talking about more is kind of more this collaboration, and there are things outside of that we may not control. As the example you said, David, there might be a meeting. So tell me a little bit about on the tech side, where it's how you're kind of differentiating from, okay, well, we could create pathways in an LMS.
So I think there's probably a couple of things we would say differently, and I concur. You can build pathways in LMS. I understand that point. So really, I think one of the key things we tried to do is this engagement piece. Yeah. So how do you get greater engagement and traction between your new hire and the person really that's the most important person to them in those first 90 days, 120 days, probably you could argue in the time with that company, which is their first line manager, the person who actually is accountable for their performance. So in this particular case, this activity here, so my colleague Rob has uploaded a video of him learning how to do something. So what he's providing to me as the manager is some evidence of how he's doing a particular task. And what I then have to do is, my responsibility is to actually share some feedback with him. Now, the trick with this is, a lot of people say, how do you get managers to give feedback? Well, it's not easy for anybody to give feedback if you don't know what you're giving feedback on, or if there's no direction around that feedback. So what we provide is people build their own here. They build a template. So what are we asking? Okay, did they do these things? Is there evidence of these things being done? What did they do well?
So that's then personalized or because again, I always get into customized versus configurable, right? And so this is actually customized. The organization would then say, hey, we don't have some generic vanilla template of this is the feedback. You know what is the kind of feedback you need to give based on the tasks of these specific roles. And then you're creating these templates by job role or whatever that is to say, we know this is the kind of feedback that you should be giving based on where these new hires are.
Totally. And we've used photographs, videos. People sometimes write up a diary or these kinds of things about how they do what they do. So the sales team did a piece. Make a video of a pitch. Here's your scenario. You're going to go and see the local pizza restaurant, and they're having troubles with their website and this kind of thing. So tell us, how would you kind of talk to them? Make a video of that. And there's two things that go on. You know, the sales guy practices that process, goes through the thinking process. They upload the video. We ask them to feedback on themselves. Maybe there'll be some questions under the video. What do you think you did well in that video? So they're reflecting on it.
Okay.
And then somebody, maybe it's the coach, maybe it's you can point it to whoever you want to point it to in your organization, is then going to give you some qualitative feedback about what. And what they can also say is, you know what, you can actually do it a bit better. Go around again, have another crack at it.
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
or great job, move on, let's do the next one. You know. And then let's set up for
and
when
so
they
from that feedback standpoint, because again, this goes back to some of the important points that we'll talk about. This lightning demo thing, I think it's tough because it's like you go back and forth in it. Anyway, it's fine. People got a chance to see it, and we have a cool GIF GIF. I don't know. People will probably yell at me for saying it wrong, but let's keep it up because I think we're going to end up bouncing back and forth on this because I think this goes back to that manager feedback in the onboarding piece is such an important part, and I know that oftentimes we struggle with it. We struggle with this part where you go, how do we get the managers to do it? Because they want us to just onboard them and let them know when we're done. We need them to do it, and if we do it all, then how do we do this? And so my understanding is you can do a blend, and I think that's a really healthy piece of, okay, we can coach and develop on this so that we can help, because there's nothing worse than you finally get that salesperson to record the video of their pitch. They do it, never hear anything. Like
radio silence.
Right? I mean, that just kills it for me. Hey, we have this great coaching program where you just upload this and then you put it there and you'll get great feedback. And you finally get the people who are like, okay, I'll do it. And then nothing happens. They're never going to do it again.
Chris, a little about that, and not to go down a rabbit hole, but I mean, what we found out originally when we built this, we put together, we call it the naughty report, you know, red, yellow, green, who's doing, who's not. You ship it out to all the managers, and half of them ignored, half of them jump on it. But we also, eventually what we did is we created a Tableau dashboard. Actually, when you create a portal, it automatically uploads the dashboard. And one of the things was, and this is for more of the directors to see if their manager's doing their job, you could have a manager, it would see how many outstanding reviews he has, how long it's been sitting in his queue. So very quickly, the reality is L&D can't get people to do a lot of things, but people's managers and directors can. So we learned real quick that we need accurate dashboards to help people manage their direct reports to make them do their job. Because to your point, if they're not going to do it, it's very deflating for the learner.
Okay.
One other thing about feedback, Guy, we used it for our care class. It was kind of neat. So our customer care class, they go out and they take phone calls. They listen to phone calls for 4 hours. And then in the afternoon, they actually take phone calls for 4 hours. And that person they worked with was their peer, and they're part of the portal. So what happened is after they did their 4 hours, the peer would give them feedback in the portal. Now, they could have gave it to them verbally, but you know how the verbal goes. You're doing great. You did fine. So they can give them real descriptive feedback in the portal. We brought people back into the room after that. We couldn't teach. You know why? Because everyone was hitting refresh on the portal because they were just dying to see what that peer is going to tell them about how they did. Literally, we're like, hey guys, they got like an hour, half hour to put it in, just relax. Everyone's just hitting refresh, because they want to hear what their peers are thinking about what they're doing.
Well,
what's
interesting about feedback, I think this is one of the things that's, and I liked what you showed, Guy, about the ability to customize that, because a lot of times we tell people the importance of feedback, but kind of like saying onboarding, a lot of times people don't really know what that means. And they're like, so we are encouraging people. We're saying, give your new hires feedback. Make sure you give them feedback. Feedback is a get blah, blah, blah. And they're kind of like, you're doing great. Like
that's the one.
Good job.
Good job. Yeah.
And they don't know what to say. Because what do you say? Oh, terrible job. You're the worst hire. You were a mistake. Like, okay, it's either that or great job, thumbs up. But that's not actionable for somebody to do something with. And again, providing that ability to say, we know these are the kinds of things. So I'm assuming those templates, then you can customize those by audience type. So you can say, we know people in this role are going to be doing this type of task. And as a result of that, this is the kind of feedback that you should be giving them so that you're kind of helping them understand how to give feedback. And I would say people don't, they do struggle with that. They struggle with knowing how to do it. And if you do it well, a lot of times people are like, people don't want to hear feedback. They don't want to hear bad feedback. And I don't mean bad like negative. Like they don't want to just hear the generic, great job, chap. Like keep it up. Like, okay.
Or unactionable. The word is probably unactionable.
Exactly.
They don't want unactionable feedback. They don't want to hear about, they walk out and going, so what am I doing differently now? I have no idea. He said do this, this, and this. Now I'm totally confused and probably annoyed.
Right. Yep. Okay. All right. Shift gears again. Is there anything else while we're kind of like semi-lightning? Because there's a bunch of things I want to dive into, but I also want to, if there's anything else you want to pull up.
I think the other piece I would love to bring in, I think your point about feedback is spot on, about people not sure how to do it, and therefore they say people don't like it. Well, as you rightly say, if it's badly delivered, badly structured, not actionable, that's the challenge. So we're helping to make feedback easy for people. And if you look at the stats that Dave was talking about, some of these leaders back in the Comcast organization are giving, 4, 5, 6 people a day, activity feedback, and some of them have done 2,000-3,000 over a couple of years, So don't tell me you can't get managers engaged. They are absolutely in there. But I think I've lost my train of thought now. What was I going to say? Jeeps. Oh yeah,
sing some Stevie Wonders.
No, he's got it.
I'm back in the room. Okay, was this capability building through feedback and the evidence? The engineering community got hold of this quite soon after Dave's project, and they really embraced it. And what happened for them? And I love this story, right? So they started out. If you want to go from a Tech 1, like you do certain jobs, to a Tech 2, to a Tech 3, whatever. You take an exam, okay? It's normal practice. You say, I'm ready, I'll take the exam. And it was a written exam. And they replaced that. They used the onboard platform to set out a succession process. So you want to be a Tech 2. What you now do is you prove capability of all the things that are required of a Tech 2. And when you've done that, you're eligible for a Tech 2. Doesn't mean you're automatically a Tech 2. You probably still have to have an interview or something. But, anyway, they moved
we built the capability.
We have the... Yeah. They go down to South Florida, and they talk to the engineers in South Florida. Those guys stood up and gave them a standing ovation. You know why? Because English for them was a second language, and when it came to an exam, they were not confident. That doesn't mean they weren't great engineers, but they were less confident in answering questions in a written paper. You ask them to take photographs, make videos, all that kind of stuff to show their capability, they'll do that all day long. And so in terms of making opportunity available to people, particularly in those kind of roles where it's very much a kind of a physical skill-based role.
Yep.
It was, I just thought it was fabulous, that this gives a whole group of people an opportunity to really demonstrate just how good they are,
Well, and I think that goes to this measurement topic. I mean, we can kind of talk about this one a little bit too, because what we're talking about, and I'm a huge advocate of this in pretty much anywhere, is moving away from this. Not that you move away, because it's still an important piece, but we're over-indexed on education, which is what you're talking about. Like, let's tell people how to do it. Let's fill their heads with the information, and then we'll test to see, do they know it? And there's a difference between doing that and saying, well, just because you know it does not mean you know how to do it. And I think that's just such an important point. You hear all this talk about upskilling and reskilling, and that's just it. A lot of times the approaches to upskilling are, well, let's educate people on it. And that's not solving the problem, because that doesn't necessarily translate to do it. But I love the example you gave of, well, passing a test may not be the best. I mean, I can think of a million people who are like, I'm terrible at tests. Like, this is not good for me. I know what to do. I could show you. I could walk you through it. Heck, I could be, the old racehorse and come be the teacher and teach other people how to, like, I'm that good at it. But ask me to articulate this in written form, I just can't. It's not my strength. And I think what you're talking about here is saying, well, let's actually build an experience pathway to show it, to get feedback, to do this along the way so that I can actually demonstrate the skills that I have.
Yeah, exactly. We actually changed our L&D build methodology after the portal came out, because we started getting into this mantra of learn, practice, demonstrate. And just a little build back, like to build a portal, you don't just jump in and start building, right? It's like when you try to build one of those books on one of those websites, you can't just start building a book. You got to like organize. So we have an Excel spreadsheet. Here's the activities we're doing, blah, blah, blah. But we had a column for L, P, and D. We wanted to make sure when you're building training, there's a lot of learning in there, but we got to put in practice, an ability to practice, and we got to put in demonstrate. And you got to even that out. And it really got us thinking more about not really getting all that information into the portal, but how can we figure out a way to demonstrate a skill by utilizing the portal to get a sign off using pictures, videos, one-on-ones, whatever that was. So it really made us think differently about how we built our training.
Okay. So with the platform, because that's an important piece, and Lily brought this up, and it's an important one. Education plays an important piece, and I think sometimes it's easy. I always bring up this spectrum thing where it seems like sometimes we war one way or the other. Like education's bad, performance is good, vice versa. And it's like no. I use an equation where I'm like, it's part of a complex equation in learning that you have to have the different components. So how then are people accounting for that in there? Because I think that's one of the challenges of a lot of platforms is they're good at the education piece. I have a video I need to push to you. I have a document I need to push to you. I have a e-learning I need to push to you. But that application, practice, things like that, the feedback is not always robust in being able to do that. And that is such a critical component to learning. So how is that being accounted for?
Well, I think you're absolutely right, Chris. It's not about we're not sitting here and saying that there's other components that are not important. I mean, if you want to flip up the screen here, I can just share with you very quickly. But we have a quiz tool in here. So if you want to check in on people's understanding and knowledge about a topic, you can do that. You want to point them to some e-learning, or you want to point them to some videos. You want to point them to some asynchronous type educative activities. Absolutely, you do that, and we would call that scaffolding. It's what Dave just said. So let's maybe have a section where you learn stuff. Maybe then there's a section where you practice stuff, and maybe that's where you do some video-based role plays, or you might do some call outs on with a colleague or whatever. And then let's have a section where you demonstrate. So it's about we tried to build something here which is covering off all of those modalities that are important in building capability. Yeah, it has, of course. What's that? That great phrase. You don't know what you don't know. You've got to start somewhere, particularly with onboarding. So yeah, we can provide for the learning first, but let's work our way all the way through the capability cycle. Let's not stop at learning and say, okay, so you know how to do this, off you go. Let's support you as you translate that into practice and translate that into actual performance delivery and work with you to keep refining it. Why stop at 60%? Why not go the whole way? Let's get the whole thing done.
In one note, this is, you can develop some content in here as we talk about quizzes.
That's what that was actually going to be one of my follow-up questions.
Yeah, this is not a content management system. So just how we use it, we use Inkling for our ebooks. We link to those, but we do that. We use Instilled or Keizo for our videos. We link to that. So, we do something. And then as far as practice, we're big on Enable Now. There's tons of those dApps out there, but Enable Now allowed us to build sandboxes. So really, that's the overlay. You can put quizzes in there. You can line up meetings. You can have them push videos back and forth and get feedback. But a lot of the content itself was built in other vendor stuff that we just linked to. And that was kind of the easiest way to do it because, like I said, we talked about, should we add this? Should we add that? And next thing you know, you put so much stuff into your platform that you've got no direction.
Well, and I think the challenge with that, and I think this is one of the things that makes it often difficult for people to jump into it, is you can't underestimate the effort of migrating or even just changing behavior of, okay, well, if this is how this stuff is created or where this stuff is hosted today, asking people to move the entire experience or transform it over into another place, that's a Herculean effort. Not only trying to find all the stuff that exists today, but the fact that if that's the natural process flow of how things are generated, to go, hey, also don't put it there anymore, put it over here now. They're still going to put it over there. Now you've got duplication issues, all sorts of different things. So sounds like there's some native capability to create if you need to, but really the goal is to say, hey, let's bring the complexity of these different things together into a meaningful experience pathway.
Yeah, absolutely. And and I think what I was trying to mention earlier, and maybe lost my track, was and then you can have the gateways, at the end of a section, and you can get that leader, that manager, or that coach to sign that off and say, okay, you've met all the prerequisites around the education process. Now let's move on to the practice process. We can verify you've done certain things and open it up. And certainly the early iterations, it was almost on a timed basis. So your first week, these are the things you need to kind of get done. We'll diary manage for you in that first week of, get this stuff done. At the end of the first week, you should know X, Y, Z. Second week, this is what you do. Third week, this is what you do. Fourth week, we consolidate. And now let's move out to a much more flexible approach because you've done all that prerequisite. Some of it will have been online. Some of it will have been in the workplace. Some of it might have been in a training classroom. But let's work with you to help you out in that first few weeks and guide you to a level of competence. And I think that point about, is it about competence or is it about performance? Well, in my experience, part of belonging, part of that process of actually becoming part of a business is believing that you're contributing, that actually you're doing your part, you're pulling your weight. And, I've met very few people in my consulting career who don't want to do a good job.
No, I agree with you on that.
99% of people want to do a good job.
It's such an important piece with this. And I think this is where the point about using this to help build confidence in your capability as a contributor to the organization is such a huge factor, because to your point, I mean, are there people out there who would be just happy to sit and be like, great, nobody cares I'm here, like I'm just going to enjoy it? But that's not the norm. I mean, they exist, so we can't say, oh, that never happens. Sure it does. But that's the minority. The majority of people really, I mean, there's nothing worse, at least from my experience, there is nothing worse than being new to a company and going, I don't know if I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I don't know if what I'm doing is good or bad. Like, I really want, you obviously chose to come join this company for a reason. You desire to perform well. Making sure that you give people opportunity to demonstrate and show that success, that's an engagement strategy right there. That's a retention strategy, because what can happen, and again, we talked about this before we came live. I mean, there are so many meaty metrics that you can easily tap into when it comes to onboarding and things like this, so that you can kind of say, hey, we're losing people because they don't feel that they're contributing, and they're like, I don't know, I thought this was going to be a great place I could come to and I could do this stuff, and it just doesn't really feel like I'm there.
Yeah, and the stats are off the charts on that stuff. I'm sure you've seen them yourself, Chris. There's plenty of research out there. But there was a piece of work done by SRAM, their Society of Human Resource Management. 80% of people, in this research, it's going back a few years, 2011, but they said, 80% of people quit their jobs through lack of appreciation for what they're doing.
Yep.
They don't. They're not even getting the pat on the back. Maybe that encouragement you talked about, let alone some input to what they're doing, or interest in what they're doing. And that's really key. And you talked earlier about the difference between orientation and onboarding, and I was thinking, it's like you arrive at someone's house and someone takes you in the front door and they say, oh yeah, here's our living room, and here's our kitchen, and here's our bathroom. I'll see you later. That's orientation, isn't it? As opposed to, hey, come on in. Can I make you a drink? Would you like to come and sit down in our living room? Well, let's see, and engage with people. And that's what we do when people come into our homes, don't we? I mean, I certainly like to think that I host, and I welcome people in, and then hopefully people relax a little and they take an interest in what you have to say and what you want to do, and that's the way you take it. But but big part of it.
Well, so here's another one, and I think this is an important piece. Anytime you're talking about onboarding, I think sometimes this is easy to overlook, is when you get into onboarding, it's very much a process. Onboarding is very much a process type piece. And I'm always amazed, in my experience, I've led onboarding for I don't know how many companies. And one of the things that has always been something that you have to focus on first is sometimes people want to jump to solution, right? They're jumping to like, let's do this, and what if we did this, and what if, And there's not always this grounding of what is the process? Do we know what the process looks like? And have we actually taken the time to lay this out and think about what is it today and what to be today? New ideas to be able to do that. So let's talk a little bit there on that. Because is that part? I mean, so when you partner with an organization, let me reframe it this way. If you're working with somebody on this and they're saying, you know what, we really need to do more with onboarding. We got to figure this out. Not everybody's going to say, I have these nice 6 pathways and I know week 1 we do this and week 2 we do this and things like that. So how do you help organizations get through that? Because for some folks, that would be like, I just don't even know where to start.
You want to go with this one?
I'll tell you what. Yeah, this was actually one of the visions I had when I saw this portal. So at Comcast, I'll be honest with you, it's like, ready, aim, fire, whatever it is, out of order is what we do over
Ready,
there.
fire, aim.
And ready, fire, aim. And, do you have the processes? Are they documented? And we stopped asking that question because we kind of knew the answer. But in some cases, like there was a sales methodology you could teach to explain the products. But when it came to like order management or something, what we found out is instead of trying to build the process into the portal and teach them on it, which a lot of times by the time we rolled it out, it was obsolete. Our trainers didn't know much about it. We might build an activity that says, you get a SME assigned to you, you sit next to him and have him show you the process to create an order, cancel an order, and upgrade an order. And then you don't have to put all the steps in there. You rely on a SME to do it. Now the people can argue, well, how about he's not doing it right? How about how about the SME doesn't know how to do it? Well, guess what? If you train it right and he sits next to that SME, they're going to learn the wrong way anyways. But we would use the portal just to help document that was happening. And we had experts teaching, kind of like an apprentice program for any craft or trade. But we could track that it was all that was happening. And we didn't have to get down to that minuscule detail of, I need a 20-page document to tell us how to put an order through. Let them show it to them. So it was kind of neat how we could use the portal to get into the nitty-gritty without actually being responsible for process being updated every day.
Well, and what's funny about that is it's an important piece. So when I was talking process, I was thinking the bigger onboarding process, but now you're drilling in a little bit. No, it's fine, because I think what you brought up is a really good point on this, which is I've run into this in my years doing this, where you do run into these things where you're like, how are we going to do this? Because if we create these step 1, step 2, step 3, do it, like you said, it's obsolete. Before we even launch, we roll the thing out and people go, nope, not right. And now you're in constant catch-up mode trying to do it. And so then sometimes on the other end, we'll just be like, whatever, let's just throw it over the fence and we'll hope that they get to it. And there's this middle ground in between, which is we know this is something that needs to happen. We may not know exactly how it's going to happen because it's constantly changing. But let's at least say we know at this point in the onboarding process, you should intentionally be doing this with somebody, and we're gonna empower them to figure that out. We're not going to get into all the weeds. We're going to do as much as we can, but just to make sure it's happening. But let's at least make sure it happens. Let's do something to make sure that it happens.
Agreed. I mean, people say, oh yeah, we do side-by-sides now. And we used to say, well, just think if we did structured side-by-sides that had some kind of framework, maybe not all the details, but you made sure they covered A, B, C, and D, and it was signed off. And you knew this person that went through, got these 20 or 30 things explained to them over the course of a few weeks, as opposed to hopefully the guy remembers what 20 things to show the new hire.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting, so Krishnan brought up a question about this, or how about a playbook for the onboarding process? And really, in looking what you were showing, this is almost in some regards a digital interactive playbook, because I think that's one of the limitations. And a lot of times, I remember early in my days with onboarding, that's what we did. We came up with a playbook that maybe had links to things, and it was a document that had this stuff, but it was very one directional. You just send it to people and you're like, I hope
they read it.
I hope they follow it. I hope they went through the steps. We put a lot of time and effort into this. And it didn't take long before you'd ask a new hire, hey, did you do this? Well, I tried, but my manager didn't do it, and things like. And we had no data on it, none whatsoever. We had no data to know what happened and where things are at, and we couldn't really interact. We totally had to let go. And so, to some regard, I see this as being that digital playbook version that then is a way that you can say, hey, we're making sure this is happening in a digital platform and actually making it collaborative.
And I think the point about Christian's point is a really good one, is providing also a playbook to the communities who are going to look after onboarding their people. So I know Dave had a real vision around giving autonomy to the communities that owned the onboarding process. So if it's the care team, the sales team, the engineering team, whatever it is, but give them a playbook that takes them through some of the things around learn, practice, demonstrate. How do you build that in, and think about how you sequence the onboarding process, and how do you do kind of skill breakdowns? How do you do, as Dave said, structure observations for feedback and those kinds of things? I think that's a great point, and we certainly do a lot of work with teams to help them think through those component parts that are really important in delivering it. And then, as you say, you reflect that back in what gets built out. But the key thing also is about engaging with those stakeholders who own it. So what should this look like for you? How does this work?
Yeah. How often have we built an onboarding process in a vacuum?
Yeah.
Right? Like, this is the best onboarding process. They are gonna love it. And then you send it out and they're like, yeah, no, this is not at all how we do work. So I think that collaboration piece, not just in the rollout piece, but in the actual design and architect, it's like, don't create an onboarding process that you think looks great or is going to win you a Brandon Hall award. Like, build one that the business cares about.
Absolutely.
Well, it's funny. We've actually gone 100% or 180 degrees the opposite. We had an order management team that had like 12 different roles, 30, 40 people per role, maybe onboard 6 or 7 people a year. And they're like, we need an onboarding program. We're like, we got 25,000 people coming in. You get 7 people. Like, we're going to build your So what we did is we created a generic template in the portal. We gave them basic training on how to build it. They built their own activities out. We said, okay, put a video, welcome to the job. Give them a quiz. We had like 12 steps. They built it out themselves and they managed it themselves.
So you basically created a high-level template and said, listen, and what's interesting about this is, man, I told you we were going to run out of time. This is such an important, what you're talking about right here, this is bigger than just onboarding, because I think so often, a lot of times, there's opportunity for us to do this in terms of collaboration, and we can let go of the keys a little bit, and we can say, hey, we've created some infrastructure, some basic things to make sure you're getting the basics, but we're really going to empower you to say, you build this, you make it your own. We're controlling the tech and some of the basics to make sure that you get the foundations. But rather than try and bottleneck everything through us, let's let you do it. Because to your point, David, there's 7 people a year. You know it better than we do. And there's 7 people. So for us to take the time to send people in and consult and try and do all this and then come back and build it, and then we still get it wrong and they need to edit it, just let them do it, but let's at least do that. And so that's an important piece.
We probably have 100 like portals, if you want to call it, like learning plans, some for launching products. And it gets to the point now where the business would come to us instead of said we need training. They'd say, hey, I'm looking for a portal. About 20, they would tell us we want a portal, because they got to the point where they actually saw it. They saw it work. They understood it. And like I said, I think we have like 120 portals between product launches, new hire, progression training, and they're all kind of combined together. You just click on it and you go into it. It's kind of interesting.
Okay. Well, I've got about 3,700 more questions that I would dive into, or just topics we could kind of unpack if we wanted to, but we're out of time. So I'm just going to say, I think one of the biggest things that is just a fantastic takeaway with this is, one, the intentionality behind it, the collaboration that goes into it. And I think, both of you would agree that it's like the tech is there to enable these things, but there's some work you have to do in terms of figuring out your process, figuring out your collaboration, how you do this. But what On.Board is really designed to do is say, hey, let's use technologies to accelerate this. So rather than sending out a PDF that goes into the ether that you have no idea, have it be done here where they can collaborate, where they can interact, and where you can start to see and manage and measure that to be able to do it along the way. Okay.
Totally agree.
Well, this has been fantastic. Maybe next time we'll do another round of karaoke, and then we'll all sing, and we'll close it out with that or something like that. But
you're bringing
thank
the
you
beers
for the
next
time. Yeah, there you go. That's right. We'll do it later in the evening or something.
Guy, leave us with some Stevie Wonder, Guy, will you?
Yeah.
Very
All right,
superstitious.
Well, there you go. Well, thanks everybody for watching. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Friday and a great weekend. Thanks, Guy and David, for joining me, and we will see you next week.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks a lot, Chris.